Hello, everybody. My English name is Cherry Smiley, and I come from the Tla'amin or Thompson Nation from the southern interior of BC, and from the Dene or Navajo Nation from the southwest United States. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Mohawk territories, or that's what we've been told, and to thank the Mohawk people for allowing us to be visitors on their lands. I'm here today to speak on behalf of a mighty group of women warriors, the Aboriginal Women's Action Network, or AWAN. We are a group of Native women based out of Vancouver, BC, on unceded Coast Salish territories. I'd like to talk a little bit about what unceded means, because we hear that word thrown around occasionally, sometimes a lot. Unceded territories means the land was never surrendered, abandoned, transferred, or traded. The same concept applies across BC and Canada. Lands were never legally or fairly surrendered, transferred, traded, or given. Today, when someone takes something from someone without their permission, you call that stealing. When Canada was stolen from its rightful caretakers, it meant and it means that our ways of life, our knowledge and experiences and laws that have served us since time immemorial were deemed to have no value. My way of life, my knowledge and experience and laws have no value. It was decided that we, as Native women, have no value. And this is where we will start the discussion. AWAN was established in 1995 in response to a pressing need for an Aboriginal women's group to provide a much-needed voice for Aboriginal women's concerns regarding governance, policymaking, women's rights, employment rights, violence against women, Indian Act membership and status, and many other issues affecting Aboriginal women today. We are an all-volunteer, unfunded, independent, feminist group of Aboriginal women from many nations that share common experiences as Native women and that share an analysis of prostitution as inherently racist, a tool of colonization, and a form of violence against women. Most recently, we have taken a stand against the total decriminalization and/or legalization of prostitution. As Aboriginal women, we are wholeheartedly invested in the issue of prostitution. This is not simply an issue of the moment for us. This is not something we study on the way to our PhDs and then disregard. This is not something we write about and think about and speak about and then forget about. We are women who have been prostituted. We are daughters and sisters and friends of prostituted women. We are women who have never been prostituted, but who accept the responsibility to speak out for and with those women we know and love, and those women we don't know and love who are being harmed as we speak. The unacceptable male demand for access to the bodies of women and girls creates and fuels the market that allows pimps, brothel owners, and traffickers to profit off our backs. AWAN sees the trafficking of women and children for sexual exploitation as inseparable from prostitution. Trafficking is the process. It is the forced movement of women and children, and prostitution is the result of that movement, and we know this from our collective experience. Our people and our women and children have been forced to move from our traditional homelands, from our territories onto government-created reserves and into church-run residential schools where we are, incested by our fathers and raped by priests, and now we are forced from reserves into cities, into white foster homes and jails where we continue to struggle against racism, sexism, and male violence. We use the term prostituted woman, not sex worker. Despite what some may tell you, the term sex work does not create a level playing field where men and women, white women and Native women, are equal economically, socially, or otherwise. Sex work degenders prostitution and silences the experiences and knowledge of Native women and attempts to hide the real truth, the inequality and hatred that funnels women and girls into a capitalist system of prostitution that puts profit first at any cost, that puts men and their interests first at any cost. And this inequality is real, It's there whether we choose to acknowledge it or ignore it. And we can see it here now. I can acknowledge it here now in this room as I sit here before you, hundreds of kilometers and thousands of miles from my homelands, speaking to you all in a language that is not mine because I am not fluent in my own language. I stand here speaking to you in a foreign language, a product of residential school, with my life and freedoms constrained by the Indian Act. And I stand here before you having to ask you to please consider my life and my knowledge and my sisters' lives and my sisters' knowledge as something that is valuable. In Vancouver, Aboriginal women are overrepresented in street prostitution, and we see this across Canada. We know this is no accident, it's not simply a coincidence. This is because the racist, patriarchal, capitalist colonizers have created systems like the Canadian government, the reserve system, the church, the foster care system, and the education system that devalue us as Aboriginal women and work to further exploit our lands and resources. These systems create conditions where Aboriginal women and girls struggle in and against a society that has been trying for the past 519 years to exterminate us. These systems attempt to funnel our mothers, sisters, and daughters into the institution of prostitution so we can be raped, harmed, and murdered systematically by men. Our lands and children have been stolen. We have been forcibly removed from our territories and corralled onto reservations, into residential schools, foster homes, and jails. Our languages, cultures, and traditions have been outlawed, and we have been legislated wards of the state, all in attempts to take control and exploit what rightfully belongs to us as Aboriginal women. The system of prostitution is just another addition to this list. There are some people out there, mostly men, that want to legitimate prostitution as work. They say, never mind the overwhelming rates of physical violence and murders. Johns are good guys that are just lonely. They say, never mind the verbal abuse that happens with every trick. They really are just dirty squaws and whores. They say, never mind the women that go missing, as if my sisters just disappear into thin air. They say, never mind the average age of entry into prostitution is 14 years old. Never mind because they deserve it, because they are women, because they are girls, and because they are Native women, and because they are Native girls. This is what they say about us. We denounce those assumptions and say Aboriginal women are smart, strong, and proud, and we know what we want. This is what we demand and nothing less. Real choices for women and girls. A choice between unlivable welfare, a job that pays an unlivable wage, and the institution of prostitution on stolen Native land in a culture that tells girls from birth that our bodies are for men's pleasure is no choice. We want men to make better choices because the systems that work to oppress all women and that oppress Native women in particular are created and sustained by individual men. These people are the ones that have the choice, the men, and they can choose not to buy a woman's body, not to rape, not to murder, and not to watch pornography. As Native women, we recognize the contradiction, but given the choice between negotiating with the state and unregulated capitalism, we believe pushing the state to create legislation that works towards harm elimination, not harm reduction, gives us the greatest chance of not only survival, but life. Given this, we want people to educate themselves about the Nordic model of prostitution law, and we want you to support that model. We want you to listen to us and speak with us, not for us. We want a collective definition of freedom. We want you to know your freedom is tied to ours. As Native women, we refuse to let the patriarchy separate us as women in this fight for the freedom and safety of all women and children worldwide, and we ask you to do the same. We want you to organize and advocate to your government for a guaranteed livable income, safe and affordable housing, women-only detox and recovery centers on demand, and comprehensive medical services. When defending the legalization or total decriminalization of prostitution, we want you to consider, what am I defending? Because you are defending a hateful, violent, capitalist industry that works to devalue all women, but particularly Native women. And why would you defend that? We want you to consider, who am I defending when I advocate for the legalization or total decriminalization of prostitution? Because you are not defending prostituted women. You are defending Johns, pimps, traffickers, brothel owners, and their right to purchase women. And you are defending men that have no interest in women's equality because they profit directly from it. As Indigenous women, we want to live in a world where women can walk down the street day or night without the fear of rape. A world where women can be safe in their homes. A world where women have safe and adequate homes to house themselves and their children. A world where women have no fear that their children will be stolen from them. We want a world where women and girls have all the food and clothing we need. A world where men take responsibility for our children and treat women with the respect we deserve. We want a world where Aboriginal women are listened to and recognized and respected for who we are and the values we hold. We want a world where Aboriginal women have the opportunity and means to grow old, a world where we can learn and speak our languages, a world where our territories and homelands and traditions are recognized and respected as such. Our freedom and safety as women and as Native women Indigenous to this land is possible, and we won't be told otherwise. We are women who have survived over 500 years of attempted genocide, and we know what we want, and what we want is an end to prostitution.